You mentioned earlier, I liked your quote that politics is harder than rocket science, and you mentioned that it's a third rail sometimes when you try to bring this up with certain people. Why is that?
So look, I'll put it this way. We can do exactly what we need to do from the point of view, with respect to all of that transformation that I was just talking about, from the point of view of innovation, nobody better than in the United States, but it's also happening around the world. From the point of view of policy, we know what kind of policies to put in place to drive, to put in place incentives to make this happen, and to remove the crazy incentives that still exist for producing fossil fuels. And we can afford it. I mean, there was a super interesting, if you're geeky like me, study by Citibank 2 or 3 years ago, where they looked at about a 30-year time period, and they compared a full-out action scenario on climate change versus no action, right? And their analysis was the overall costs were almost the same, slightly less for the full-on action. None of this was counting the damages from climate change. This is putting aside the damages from climate change. It's just because you have to put in a bunch of money up front to do the innovation. You have to put in a bunch of money in capital expenditures to build the solar and wind and so forth facilities. But then you know what happens when you get those up? You don't pay for fuel. The fuels from the sun, the fuels from the wind, and so forth. So yes, we can afford it. So innovation, check. Policy, check. Finance, check. The hard part, political will. That's the hard part. And it's the super hard part, and it's hard all over the world, and there's very few places where leaders are juiced up as much as they should be. And then you have the extra problems that we have in the US, partly from the denial community, and partly, and this at some level I think this is even more difficult, is a sense that if we are directionally moving in the right, we're directionally doing what we need to do, that there's a kind of implicit sense that gradual progress is okay. Because gradual progress usually is okay. Rome's not built in a day. We all know that. If we're trying to get better systems and for all sorts of things in our policy world, and we're making good progress, but not quite as much as we'd like, that's still good. But here it's not good enough. And so we need people, and now I'm talking about people who were my colleagues in the White House, my colleagues at Brookings, my colleagues when I taught recently at Yale, and on and on and on. And I'm not criticizing them. There's no reason why most people understand how fast we have to go, but we do, and there is a huge need to kind of conquer those political challenges, dealing with the people who are on the not denialist side. But again, I think mostly time is gonna deal with that, but also so that people of goodwill understand and then can apply the kind of political pressure that needs to be applied. And of course, leadership, the right kind of leadership at the top in the US is hugely important. I will say that we shouldn't go through this whole session without my pointing out that in response to President Trump's announcement, June 1st of last year, there has been a tremendous mobilization at the state, local, civil society level. There's a US Climate Alliance of now 16 or 17 states. There's hundreds of cities. There's a great many companies that are putting forward their own targets on what to do. And all of that has been very encouraging, and also encouraging both from the point of view of the actual emissions that can be reduced, but also important here, and in some sense even more important globally, to send the message that Washington has gone dark on this issue, but the United States, America more broadly, has not. So that's been really important.